Before we begin your wall tiling project, let's look at some of the really important things you need to know. These hints and tips will not only help you achieve a more professional finish and save you money.
Okay, well I'm pretty confident about most home improvement projects, so I'm keen to learn all about wall tiling. Is the technique complicated or hard work?
No, not at all. And it would be a really straightforward job if you remember some simple rules. And these rules really do apply to all home improvement projects.
Yeah.
Measure carefully and recheck your measurements before you buy your materials. And the same goes for when you start fixing the tiles in place. Measure twice and cut once. Study the instructions on all the product and tools packaging. It may not be an exciting read, but it's bound to be a useful one. Keep your work area clean and tidy. You'll work much more quickly and safely this way.
I've learnt that thorough preparation and careful planning is the secret to good quality work. But as tiles are fixed securely in place with adhesive, I don't want to get it wrong.
Don't worry. We'll follow techniques proven by experts and professionals. And right now we're going to spend some time planning and preparing before we start tiling the walls. And believe me, it'll be time well spent.
Right.
It doesn't matter if your wall tiles are ceramic, stone, glass or mosaic. They'll only look good if the wall surface is smooth and flat.
Is that really important?
Yes, it is. Firstly, your tiles are completely rigid. So if the wall surface isn't flat, they're going to show every lump and bump. And secondly, you want your tiles to be secure.
Yeah.
Here's some guidance as to what you'll need to do to prepare a variety of surfaces. Cracks, holes and imperfections. Examine the general state of the surface by running a batten or straight edge over its surface. If the wall is in a poor state, it may be easier to apply a skim of fresh plaster than try to flatten a surface with areas of filler. Don't worry about small cracks in the plaster, but if the old plaster is loose or crumbling, you'll have to hack this off and replaster the wall. Painted walls. Rub down any flaking paint with coarse sandpaper to give a sound finish, and then score the walls with the edge of a scraper. This will help the tiles to stick fast. Wash down with a sugar soap solution. This will remove dust and grease. And seal the surface with a coat of PVA sealant or tile adhesive primer and allow to dry completely. Wallpaper. Remove all wallpaper or lining paper and then prepare the underlying surface following the instructions for painted walls. Old tiles. As long as they're flat and secure, you can lay new tiles over old. Wash down with soapy water and allow to dry before tiling with tile-on-tile adhesive. Bare brick walls. Either plaster or panel with plasterboard, waterproof plywood or sheets of MDF. New plaster. The plaster must be completely dry, and in certain circumstances this can take up to 2 months. Seal the surface with a coat of PVA sealant or tile adhesive primer and allow to dry.
Okay, so I have a sound and flat wall surface, but what do I do about tiling around obstructions such as pipes?
Well, don't worry, we will be showing you that later, including tiling around windows and windowsills.
Yeah.
But some obstructions, such as pipes running across or down a wall, need to be boxed in first and then tiled over for the neatest finish.
Right.
Right, so first of all, you need to work out how many tiles you're going to need to buy. So we'll need to make a simple plan of each wall of the room and mark on that plan the height to which you're going to be tiling and any areas that are not going to be tiled, such as a window or a door.
Okay, here's my plan of the wall area.
Right, you need to multiply the height to which you're tiling against the width of the wall to work out the overall area, and then deduct from that the areas that's not going to be tiled, in this case part of the window.
Okay, I've worked out that for this wall and the basin splashback I'll need 4.5 square metres.
That sounds about right, but double check your calculations, and then when you're happy, add 10%. That will allow for cutting tiles at the edges and for any breakages. Alternatively, most B&Q tile packs contain a tile calculator chart.
Okay, when I buy my tiles, is it easy to work out how many packs or boxes I'm going to need?
Yes, it is. Just look on the pack or the box and it will tell you how many square metres that each box will cover. If you have any unopened boxes, then you can return those to B&Q for a refund. When you're buying tiles, make sure that the batch numbers match on all the tile boxes that you buy, just as you would for wallpaper.
Right.
This will minimise the risk of shade variations.
Okay. And what about working out how much adhesive and grout I'll need?
Again, no problem. Look on the pack. All B&Q tile adhesive and grout clearly states how many square metres each pack will cover.
We're going to use a ready mixed adhesive and grout that is white, but what if I wanted to use a different colour grout?
Not all adhesives and grouts are ready mixed. And remember, not all tile adhesive can be used as grout, so read the pack carefully.
Right.
You can buy powder adhesive or grout if you prefer, and mix the solution yourself following the instructions on the packet. It's entirely up to you. However, some people do find ready mixed products are easier to use.
Yeah. What about really wet areas like a shower? Would you need to use a special adhesive or grout?
If you're tiling a wet area, then we recommend that you choose a waterproof grout from B&Q. And finally, don't forget you'll need some spacers too.
Oh yes, the little white plastic crosses that we use to separate the tiles.
Yes, they space the tiles accurately. Once they're in position and the tile's grouted, then they're completely hidden. The spacers for wall tiles and floor tiles are different sizes, so be sure that you buy the right ones.
Okay, so now I've got all my tiles, my spacers, my ready mixed adhesive and grout. Where do I start? Here?
Hang on a minute. Tiles look really good when they're centred onto a wall or onto a feature such as the window. You wouldn't just start from one corner of the room. Just think the walls may not be perfectly square. So you may end up at the opposite end having a tiny sliver of tile to cut, which would look terrible.
Right.
So what we're going to do is to make sure that the tiles are symmetrical. This will look terrific and will give us a really professional finish.
Yes, that's definitely the look I want. So how do I achieve this?
Well, first of all, let's make a simple measuring device from a piece of straight batten at least 2 meters long, like this.
Right.
This will be our tiling gauge rod and be really useful for marking off the wall.
Okay.
So let me show you how.
Right.
Lay out tiles in a row on the floor, complete with spaces between them, and then mark with a pencil the positions of the tiles and gaps using a small square to be accurate. Okay, now you finish off marking up the rod, and as we're using rectangular tiles, we'll also need to mark the other side of the batten with the tiles lying horizontal.
Okay, that's that done, so where do we begin?
Well, the window is the central feature on this wall, so we'll start by centering our tiles on the window.
Okay.
Each room will be different, but your tiles will look right if they're centered on the most prominent feature, such as here to our window, or if you have two windows, the central point between the windows, or if there is a door or opening in the wall, the central point of the wall itself. If the wall has no features, then measure and mark the central point of the wall. The window is our central feature on this wall, so we're going to use the center of the window as our start point. Okay, so here's the center point of the feature.
Yep.
We need to take the gauge rod and line it up so that the edge of one of the marks on the rod lines up with the center point.
Right.
And then we can clearly see how much we need to cut the end tile to fit.
Yeah.
If that was much less than half the width of the tile, we might need to think about repositioning the center point. But first of all, we need to check that the other side is also okay. So as you can see, if we line up the marks, the other side is fine.
Right.
So our center point is ideal.
That's really great, but what would happen if we did need to reposition the center point?
Right. If you do need to reposition your center point, then simply you'd line up the gauge rod so that the center point now runs through the midpoint of a tile.
All right.
And as you can see, that gives you a much wider piece to cut from the end.
Yeah.
While we're here, the last thing we need to do now is to mark off on the wall the position of the first hole tile, and that'll be where we start our tiling from.
Right, okay.
We now need to draw a true vertical line to start our tiling from.
Right.
If this center point was in the middle of the wall, we would use the center point and draw the vertical from there. Because it's in the middle of the window feature, we've had to offset the center point, and that's why I made that mark there.
Okay.
So now we put the gauge rod against the mark,
Yeah.
and we'll need a spirit level to make sure that's absolutely vertical. Just move it over a bit. How does that look?
Perfect.
Good. So now you draw a line from the floor.
Here?
Yes, on that side. That goes through our offset center point to about the height that you will be tiling to. Good. We now have the point from which we can start tiling the wall.
I see. So as we're part tiling this wall, we've just drawn the line to about here.
Mm-hmm.
But if we were to do the whole wall, would you draw the line right to the ceiling?
Yes, you would. And now I'll show you how you'll be able to work out how you'll position tiles neatly up and down the wall. Take the gauge rod and hold it in line with the vertical pencil mark, with the end resting on the floor or the skirting board. Make a pencil mark on the wall at the top of the rod across your existing pencil line. Now slide the gauge rod up the vertical pencil line to the ceiling, and if you're very lucky, the pencil mark you just made might line up exactly with the tile mark on the gauge rod, showing that the tiles will fit exactly without cutting. If they do not line up, keep the rod pushed up against the ceiling and look at the tile mark on the gauge rod below your pencil mark on the wall. Halve the distance between them. This will give you some idea of the size of the cut tiles, which will, as ever, look best if they're at least half a tile deep. If they will be narrower than this, then make a new mark on the wall in line with the next tile mark down. Measure the distance between these two pencil marks and make a third mark exactly halfway between them. Write on the wall to show that this is your new positioning mark. Don't worry, you won't see the pencil marks once you've tiled the wall. Now hold your gauge rod so that the end is just clear of the skirting or floor, moving it until one of the tile marks on the rod aligns with the positioning mark. Make a new mark on the wall level with the foot of the rod. This will be the starting point for the first row of hole tiles. Now use the gauge rod and spirit level to draw a level line across the wall at this point. We decided that the top of our tiles would correspond to the top of the basin splashback.
That's right, yeah.
So I've measured that already, and if you hold on to that,
Yeah.
we'll now mark that onto the wall.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind holding that there, thank you. So it corresponds to there.
Okay.
So that's the top of our tiles, but we need to be certain that still looks good visually.
Okay.
So we'll take the gauge rod and, using the complete tile end of the gauge rod, line it up to find out where the bottom of the last whole tile is going to come. And that should be there. So if you mark that.
Yeah.
And just to check, if you look at that, you'll see that if we line that tile edge mark up, it's just less than a whole tile in length.
Yes.
Which is good for cutting.
Okay.
So that is a good place to start the top of the tiles.
Right.
So now what we need to do is establish a true horizontal along there to use that as a start point for our tiling.
Okay.
So as we did before with the vertical, take our gauge rod and check that it is horizontal.
Okay.
Good. And it's on the mark. So now draw a line against the edge of the
Right.
rod. Good. There's a horizontal and there's a vertical to start tiling the wall from.
Excellent. So can I start tiling along this line now?
Almost, not quite. What we need to do is to support these tiles while the adhesive setting, otherwise they'll start to slip.
Right.
So what we need to do now is to nail a batten into the wall, lined up with our mark. So we'll be nailing this batten to the wall, remembering to not to drive the nails all the way in, so it's easier to remove the batten.
Right.
I've already checked the wall for any hidden pipes or cables, which you must always do before you start nailing into walls. So, hold it there for a moment.
Yep.
We simply knock this into the wall. Don't worry about any marks that the nail leaves, because they will be hidden by the tiles.
Of course, yeah.
And remember to just leave some of the nails showing, because that'll be easier to remove the batten.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can now start tiling from there.
Do we put another batten here on this vertical line?
Yes, we do. If you pass me the batten,
Oh.
line it up against the vertical line.
Yep.
Remembering, of course, as ever, that you check for hidden pipes or cable
Yep.
before we start nailing. Okay. And remember, it's always a good idea just to double check to make certain that you're still vertical.
Great. So now we've got the horizontal and the vertical battens in place. Are we ready to start tiling?
Yes. You'll start by fixing whole tiles to the wall until you get to the corner when you're going to have to cut tiles. We call these whole tiles field tiles.
Right.
And it is very quick and straightforward fixing field tiles.
Great.
Before we fix the tiles to the wall, let's take a moment to unpack all the tiles that you think you're going to need and then check them for defects, and also mix them up as you stack them to one side.
I understand why you'd want to check the tile for defects, but why do you have to mix them up?
To minimise any problems through subtle differences in shading. It's not so important for white tiles like these, but with coloured tiles it could make a difference.
Right, I see.
And of course, if you're working on a finished floor, like we are, then you need to protect the floor with dust sheets, like we have here.
Okay. Right, well, I'm ready to start.
Start against the battens here. Put on your protective gloves. And now, scoop out some adhesive onto the end of the notched spreader like this, and spread it across the wall. Work away from the vertical batten and apply the adhesive with vertical and then horizontal strokes, holding the spreader at an angle of about 45 degrees. Apply no more than about 1 square metre at a time, depending on the size of your tiles, or the adhesive may go hard before you apply all the tiles. It's important to use a notched spreader, as the ridges of adhesive made by the notched spreader ensure that there is just the right amount of adhesive behind each tile. They'll be sure to lie flat this way. The notch sizes in a wall tiling spreader are smaller than those for floor tiles, so make sure you have the right spreader. If you're using a combination spreader with both notch sizes, then make sure you use the correct side. It's a messy job, so keep a damp sponge or cloth handy and wipe up as you go along. Right, that's a good area to start with. Place the first tile into the corner made by the two battens. The tile should lie against the battens and press it firmly in place. Now, place a tile above and to the side of the first and press them into place. Now's the time to insert the spacers into the corners of the tiles and adjust the tile positions as necessary. There are two ways of using spacers. Either bury them into the corners like this and grout over, or simply insert one leg of the spacer between the two tiles like this and pull it out once the adhesive is set. When you're working against the battens, you will need to press the leg of a spacer between the tiles. If you're placing spacers at the corners, make sure they're pushed home so that they're totally hidden by the grout. If you drop adhesive onto a tile, use your damp sponge or cloth to wipe it off immediately. The adhesive will be very hard to remove once it's set. Scrape off excess adhesive from around your field tiles too.
Right, so we fixed the wall, all the field tiles. So where do I start with the edging tiles?
We'll start here in the corner, but don't just measure up one space and assume that all the edging tiles will be the right size all along the wall, because most walls are not vertical. So it's better to measure and cut each tile separately.
I understand that it's very important to measure accurately. Is there a foolproof technique?
Well, there's more than one way. You can use a tape measure and measure the top and bottom of the tile and transfer that onto the tile to be cut.
Right.
Or there's another method, which I prefer. Take a whole tile, lay it on top of the last tile in the row, making sure it's accurately aligned. Then place another tile on top and butt this tile up to the wall.
Right.
If you're not going to be tiling on this wall, then leave a spacer's width against the wall.
Right.
If you are going to be tiling up to the wall, then you can just butt it right up to the wall and then measure from there.
Okay.
So you then use your tile marker and draw a line like so. This is the tile you're going to be cutting.
Right.
Take your tiles away and then cut along that line. Any slight adjustments can be made with a tile file.
Right.
And then make sure that it fits.
Great.
So here's our first cut tile, and as you can see, it fits nicely into place.
That's really good. But there's actually not a lot of room in that corner to apply the adhesive. Shouldn't we use a smaller Knotch spreader?
There's no need. All we do is to use the narrow edge of the spreader, as you can see there, and apply the adhesive directly to the back of the tile.
Right.
Like so. And then press the tile into place. Right, and don't forget to put the spacer into place as well. There, that's the tile in place. Would you like to have a go at the second one?
Yeah, should I put these gloves on?
Yes, please. There's the second tile. That's the edge that fits against the wall. That's it, just spread a little bit along fairly
Is that
flat.
enough?
That should be enough.
Okay.
And then nice and firm. That's the way. Good. Just drop the excess off out of the way.
Shall I stick it on?
Yes, please. And then drop it into place. And don't forget to put the spacers.
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Should I clean it up with the sponge now?
Yes, that's a good idea. There you go. Especially the piece in the corner there against the wall.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so now we've fixed all these field tiles in place. What do we do now we've reached the window?
Well, we need to continue along the horizontal batten. So what we'll need to do is to cut the tiles to fit underneath the windowsill and then carry on the other side with the field tiles.
Right.
We'll start by removing this vertical batten, and then we'll measure and cut this first tile here, and then we'll carry on measuring and cutting along.
I see.
Right, we're going to remove this vertical batten using the claw hammer.
Right.
And now you'll see why it's important to leave the nail proud, because it will make the job that much easier, like so.
I see.
And then we'll do the same with the bottom. And then we'll just ease this out.
I see. Okay, I can see that the nail has slightly damaged the wall there. Is that a problem?
No, that kind of slight damage is inevitable, and all we'll do is we'll fill it to make it good, and then when we redecorate you won't see it.
Okay.
Right, we've taken away the vertical batten.
Yep.
And we've cleared the excess adhesive from the edge to give us a nice clean edge to work to. So now we're going to measure and cut the tile to go there.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, it's quite simple. We take a whole tile, put it into place against the previous tile, and make sure that we allow for the spaces.
Right.
And when we're happy it's in the right place, take a tile marker and make a mark on the tile here, flush with the window recess.
Right.
And then without moving the tile, make another mark just here, flush with the bottom of the windowsill.
Okay.
Then take the tile and using a straight edge to give you a nice clean edge, mark the surface of the tile from both your marks, like so. Then you'll cut along these two lines, take that away, and the tile should fit perfectly.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so I want to finish all along the edge of my part-tiled wall with this feature edging trim. Is it easy to fit, and can I use it on these external corners at the window?
Yes, it is very easy to fit, and we will be using it on the edges of the window.
Right.
Tile and trim comes in either metal or plastic and in a wide range of colours. It's very easily cut to size, and it not only protects the edge of the tile but also looks really good when it's in place. To fit it in place, having cleared away the excess adhesive from the edge of the tiles before the adhesive set, you simply line it up carefully and then just slot it down into place like so.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with that. It looks perfect.
And here's how we're going to tile around the window. Start off by tiling the top of the window recess. Support the tiles in place whilst the adhesive hardens with an offcut of wood and 2 battens. Then tile the sides of the window recess and finally complete the window by tiling the sill. You'll need to apply the adhesive to the back of the tiles all round the window recess. As we're only part tiling our wall and around the window, we'll apply tiles to the sides of the window recess first and finally to the sill. Apply the adhesive to the back of the cut tile as always. Fix your edging trim in place to the edges and to the top first, and then across the windowsill itself. At the corners, you'll need to mitre the edging trim. This is not at all difficult. Use a small mitre box and a junior hacksaw to make an accurate mitre joint. Remember, as always, to measure twice and cut once. Now fix the windowsill tiles in place. Don't forget the spacers. Lastly, fit the final length of edging trim, and it really is worth cleaning up as you go along. It's so much easier to remove adhesive before it hardens. Once the tiling is complete around the window and the adhesive is set, remove the horizontal batten or battens. Scrape away any dried adhesive from the edge of the tiles where the batten had been fixed in place. Now, complete the tiling with cut tiles to the skirting board.
There you go.
Thank you.
Oh, that looks really great.
Yes, we've finished the tiling, but now we need to leave the adhesive to set before we can fill the joints with grout. How long that takes depends on the type of adhesive. You'll need to check the manufacturer's instructions carefully.
Okay.
In our case, it's going to take 24 hours.
Right. How do we seal all these joints in the tiles, and how do we achieve a finished look?
Well, we're now going to apply the grout, which will fill the joints and will leave the tiles looking beautiful.
Okay. Is there more than one type of grout?
Yes, there is. Grout comes in a pre-mixed form or in a powder form and in lots of different colours. Remember to use a waterproof grout in your wet areas.
Right.
We apply the grout by applying a small amount to the tiles using either a spreader or a grout float like this.
Okay.
Take a small amount and work it into the joints like so, and then use the grout float to spread the grout into the joints as you go along.
Right.
You need to work quite fast because it won't take long for the grout to start drying.
Right.
Then use the float to remove as much of the excess grout as you can. if you use long diagonal strokes, it helps to make sure that the grout goes well into the joints to ensure a good finish. You carry on doing this until you've done a reasonable area, but bear in mind that before the grout gets too hard, you'll need to wipe off the excess with a sponge. So if I could just clean this small area now. And then we will just continue along the wall, applying the grout in small sections, cleaning it off before it gets too hard, and making sure it's well into the joints. So then you leave the grout to harden slightly, and then you neaten the joints using the grout shaper,
Right.
like so.
I see the tiles are coated with a thin powdery film from the grout. How do I remove this?
That's simple. Just clean off the grout residue with a soft clean cloth.
Oh, right. And do I need to seal these tiles?
No, all glazed tiles are protected by their glaze, so all we'll need is an occasional wipe down with warm water and detergent.
Right.
Don't use abrasive cleaner or an abrasive sponge, as that could damage the glaze.
Right. And what about wall tiles that are not glazed?
Follow the instructions for each kind of tile. Most unglazed tiles will need to be made water resistant or waterproof by applying a tile sealant.
Right.
In principle, unglazed tiles need to be sealed before they're applied to the wall. That way you can apply the grout without discolouring the surface of the tile.
Right.
Once the tiles have been grouted and cleaned, then apply a further coat of tile sealant.
Okay. And would you need to reseal the tiles from time to time?
It depends on the type of tile and where they're used.
Right.
But as always, follow the manufacturer's instructions.
Okay.
Once you've laid or fixed all the field tiles or hole tiles, then you're going to need to be cutting tiles, either around the edges or around obstructions.
Okay.
Cutting tiles is perfectly straightforward, and B&Q sell a wide range of hand and power tools which are easy to use.
Okay. Are there any differences in the tools and techniques for cutting glazed tiles and stone tiles?
That's a very good point. Yes, there are differences. You can cut glazed tiles with either a hand-operated tile cutter like this or a powered tile cutter like this. But for stone tiles, we recommend a powered tile cutter. The hand-operated cutter works on a scoring and snapping principle, where you break through the glaze by scoring once only, and then you snap the tile along the scored line. The powered cutter cuts the tile with a diamond wheel cooled by recirculating water and makes light work of cutting for any tiling projects, and some models are designed to cut bevel edges. It's ideal for cutting external corners like this as well. For small curved or circular shaped cuts, you could use a tile saw or a jigsaw with a tile cutting blade like this. But whatever tile cutter you use, always keep one of these handy. It's a tile file and is the perfect tool for removing rough edges from tiles as well as for making small shape changes.
What type of safety equipment would you recommend that we use for cutting tiles?
Well, always use the appropriate safety equipment. So for all tile cutting jobs, you should wear gloves and eye protection.
Right.
And if you're using a power cutting tool, then you should use an RCD for electrical protection, use ear defenders, and wear a dust mask.
Okay. Can you show me how to use this manual tile cutter to cut this glazed tile?
Yes, no problem. You'd first of all measure the tile, and then you'd set the guide to that measurement, and then you place the tile onto the cutter, glazed side up, against the guide.
Right.
Press down steadily on the handle and push the scorer forward to score a line. Make sure you score the line only once, and then press down firmly on the handle to snap the tile along the scoring line like this. It does pay to practice with offcuts, so would you like to try?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's really easy. As long as you score just once and maintain a steady, even pressure, the tile should cut accurately every time.
It will.
This seems really great for cutting straight lines, but is it any good for cutting internal corners or curves?
No, for that you'll need to either use a very simple but effective tile saw, which as you can see has a round blade which makes it easy to change direction as you saw, or a jigsaw with a suitable tile cutter blade.
Right.
And don't forget that a tile file is useful for smoothing the edge of a cut tile or for making final adjustments to the exact fit of a cut tile.
Right. Can you show me how to use the tile saw?
Yes, no problem. I'll just go there. Okay. I'll just clamp the tile into position. There's probably a guideline for you to cut to.
Yeah.
But simply you go. And of course you need to finish off and get the curve exactly right with the tile file.
I see.
It's likely you'll need to cut tiles to fit round obstructions such as a pipe, and so, as always, when cutting or shaping a tile to fit, measure twice and cut once. First of all, tile around the pipe with hole tiles. Now, take a hole tile and use this as a guide to make pencil marks on the wall level with the top, bottom and both sides of the pipe, like this. Now transfer the marks to a hole tile using a tile marker, and remember to support the tile on spacers if necessary to make sure the marks are in the right place. Now use a set square or another tile to join up the lines across the tile. Where they cross, they'll form a square. Stand an offcut of the same pipe in the middle of the square and draw round it. Now, cut the tile in two so that the cut passes through the middle of the circle. To remove the half circles from the tile, use either a tile saw or a jigsaw fitted with a tile cutting blade. Check the fit of the two tiles in place and make any final adjustments with a tile file. Now apply adhesive to the back of the tiles. You should find that the join is almost invisible. Either grout or apply a silicone sealant between the tiles and the pipe. The techniques for planning and fitting mosaic tiles are much the same as for regular tiles. You just treat each panel of mosaic tiles as a whole tile.
Okay, well I'd like to make a splashback for the basin using these mosaic tiles.
Okay, well that's a straightforward project, whether you use mosaic tiles or regular tiles.
Is it best, as always, to work from a central point?
Absolutely. So the first thing we need to do is to measure how wide we want the splashback to be. Would that be the width of the sink?
It is, yeah.
Good. Okay, so we measure the width of the sink and then mark off the central point like so.
Okay.
And we need as well to decide how high the splashback is going to be.
I'd like it to be 1 mosaic panel high.
Fine.
And do we have to draw a vertical line as well?
Yes, we do. And we mark the vertical line using the spirit level up against the mark that we made. Like so. And then mark the line. And as with regular tiling, we use that vertical line as our starting point for tiling, along with a horizontal line if necessary, but in this instance we're going to use the basin as the horizontal guide.
Okay. And do you need to use a special tile adhesive for mosaic tiles?
Yes, you do. Mosaic tile adhesive is specially formulated to dry more slowly, to allow you more time to be able to make adjustments to the mosaic panels as you work.
Okay.
As always, wear protective gloves. For showers and bathrooms, use a water-resistant anti-mold adhesive. Start applying the adhesive from the centre here. Scoop out some adhesive onto the end of the Knotch Spreader like this and spread it across the wall. Work away from the vertical line, be careful not to cover it, and apply the adhesive with horizontal strokes, holding the spreader at an angle of about 45 degrees. It's important to use a Knotch Spreader as the ridges of adhesive made by the Knotch Spreader ensure that it's just the right amount of adhesive behind the tiles. They'll be sure to lie flat this way. The notch sizes in a wall tiling spreader are smaller than those for floor tiles, so make sure you have the right spreader. If you're using a combination spreader with both notch sizes, make sure you use the correct side. And here's a tip: keep a damp sponge or cloth handy. You're bound to make a bit of a mess, so wipe up as you go along. If need be, protect your basin with plastic or cotton dust sheets. Right, now place the first mosaic panel against the vertical line and press it firmly in place with the flat of your hand. Rest the panel on the top of the basin with a row of spacers. Although you can slide and move the panel a little, try to work accurately, as the backing mesh or paper will disintegrate once it comes into contact with the adhesive. Now place another panel to the side of the first and press it into place. Check your work is level and straight as you go along with a spirit level like this, so that you can make immediate adjustments to the tiles as necessary, and clean up as you go along. You don't use spacers for mosaic tiles. The tiles are held into place by the mesh or paper until the adhesive sets, but it's a good idea to help to bed the mosaic tiles into place so that they lie flat like this. Take a grout float and work across the mosaic with a slapping action, making light but firm blows.
This is really quick and easy, but what do we do when we drop adhesive onto the mosaic tiles?
You need to remove the excess adhesive immediately with your damp sponge or cloth. Any excess adhesive will be very difficult to remove once it's dry.
Right.
And remember to remove any adhesive which is squeezed out from the edges of the tiles.
Okay. Okay, that's fine, but what would happen if I needed to cut the panel of mosaic tiles? Do I need any special tools or equipment to cut the mesh backing?
No, not at all. Just use a pair of scissors or a craft knife to cut down between the rows of tiles.
Okay.
Right, we've finished tiling, and now we need to let the adhesive set before we can grout between the joints. Okay. How long this takes depends on the type of adhesive, so you'll need to check the manufacturer's instructions.
Okay. Is there more than one type of grout?
Yes, grout comes in a premixed form or in a powder form and in many different colours. Don't forget to use a waterproof grout for your wet areas.
Okay.
Use a grout spreader to press a small amount of grout onto the tiles and then work the grout into the joints with the spreader like this. Make upward strokes and work quickly to complete the panel, as the grout will soon begin to harden. Immediately go over the tiles with a damp sponge to remove any excess grout before it hardens, but make sure you don't drag any grout from the joints. Mosaic tiles are small and have many more joints than regular tiles, so it's almost impossible to shape the joints before the grout hardens. Use the damp sponge to smooth the joints flush with the tiles instead.
Okay, now we've finished the grouting, I can see, as always, that the mosaic tiles have been left with a thin powdery film. How do I remove this?
Simple, just use a clean soft cloth and gently polish the tiles like so.
Right. Do I need to seal these tiles?
No, glazed mosaic tiles don't need sealing. To keep them clean, just wipe them down occasionally with warm water and a detergent. Right. Don't use abrasive scourers or abrasive sponges, as that may damage the glaze.
Okay.
Tiles are tough and hard wearing, but you can repair and renovate tiles without the need for special tools. When you want to fix something to a tiled wall, like a glass shelf or a towel holder, for example, you will need to drill into and through the tiles. It won't crack the tiles if you follow these simple guidelines. We recommend for ceramic tiles you use a ceramic tile bit. Look at the pointed tip. This will break through the glaze quickly and stop the bit skidding across the tile too. Hold up your fitting against the tiles, make sure it's level, and then mark off the drilling positions with a tile marker. To stop the drill skidding across the tile as you drill, you can break the glaze before drilling by twisting the tip of a tile scorer into the hole position. This will also steady the tip of a drill bit before drilling. Use a slow speed at first to break through the glaze and establish the hole. It's quick and easy. When you need to replace a damaged tile, you won't need to retile the area around the damaged tile. I'll show you how to remove and replace a single tile. Rake out the grout around the edge of the damaged tile. And then drill some holes into the tile. Change the drill bit for a larger one if necessary. Use a hammer and cold chisel to smash out the centre and then work to the edges, removing tile pieces as you go. Be careful at the edge so that you don't damage the tiles all around. Now, use a small scraper to remove as much of the adhesive as possible. Check you've removed enough adhesive by inserting a new tile without any adhesive. It should not sit proud of the surrounding tiles. Apply adhesive to the back of the tile and press it into place. Use a short length of wooden batten to help to press the tile in place so that it lies flush with the other tiles. Fit spacers around the tile to support it in place. Once the adhesive is set, remove the spacers and grout the tiles. When grout becomes stained or tired looking, but the tiles are in good condition, it's a simple job to make your tiles look great again. First of all, see if an application of grout cleaner will clean off stains or fungal growth. If not, you'll have to scrape out the grout and apply fresh grout. Use a grout raker, like this, and rake out the grout to about half the thickness of the tile. Do this methodically. I suggest all the vertical joints first and then all the horizontal joints, making sure that you don't miss any. Now it's time to apply the grout. Grout's available in both a pre-mixed and powder form, and in many different colours too. Don't forget to use a waterproof grout for wet areas. Use a grout float to press a small amount of grout onto the tiles and then work the grout into the joints with the float like this. Make long upward diagonal strokes and work quickly to complete the wall as the grout will soon begin to harden. Immediately go over the tiles with a damp sponge to remove any excess grout before it hardens, but make sure you don't drag any grout from the joints. Leave the grout to harden slightly and then use a grout shaper to neaten the joints, like this. Once the grout begins to dry, you'll see that the tiles are covered in a thin powdery film from the grout. So wipe off this grout residue with a soft, clean cloth.